Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Fallout 76, or more, a discussion video about Fallout 76. My name's Camel, and today we'll be talking about how exactly charisma is going to work within Fallout 76. After going through all of the footage from E3, I did see some charisma perks. Some of them made sense, some of them didn't. And it really got me thinking, charisma, traditionally in Fallout games, basically makes you better at interacting with NPCs, non-player characters. If you have a super charismatic character, when you walk into a city, you might get better prices, you might get speech options that wouldn't be available to you otherwise. But of course in Fallout 76, the other characters you run into are all being played by real people. So in terms of an in-game system, charisma will not affect how you interact with other players. It might do in a small sense, but traditionally, if someone wants to give you a better price for something, or if someone wants to give you some information, it's going to have nothing to do with the internal value of your character's charisma. It's going to do with you, the real person's charisma, and the real other person you're talking to, their charisma, whether your personalities get on, whether you come to an agreement on something. So the traditional use of charisma is kind of moot in Fallout 76, but it is still in the game, and it really got me thinking what it's going to be used for. Well, in the making of Fallout 76 no-clip documentary, we get an over-the-shoulder shot here of a screen, and the guy selects the charisma trait, perk, attribute, ability, whatever you want to call it. And down the bottom we can see charisma is your ability to lead and help others. It allows you to share higher point perk cards and also affects your rewards from group missions and prices when you barter. Alright, there's a lot there that we can actually pick apart. So it is very vague at the start there. Charisma is your ability to lead and help others. Do groups need a leader? How exactly do you lead someone? Again, whether or not you make a good leader will be based on your real life personality, which then shines through this avatar, this character in Fallout 76. So I don't know how an in-game statistic, a perk, and number within the game's engine can make you a better leader, unless there's an actual mechanic to it, like a group needs a leader. Maybe the higher the charisma level of the group's leader determines the kind of loot that you get. So already confused, straight out of the gate, your ability to lead and help others. Again, not determined by an in-game number, but instead by your real-life personality. Next we have, it allows you to share higher point perk cards and also affects your rewards from group missions. Alright, let's stop there because there's a lot there already. So with perk cards, when you level up, you get to choose a perk card. Now apparently you can swap out perk cards, but you can also trade perk cards with other players. I touched on this a lot more in depth in my Fallout 76 is bringing back role-playing elements video if you want to check that out. But basically, if you're struggling killing a boss enemy, but someone in your group is like, look, I know if I had the extra 10% sneak attack damage perk card that we would be able to pull this off. And someone else in your group might go, hey, I'm the medic, I'm not using this sneak card, but I've got the sneak perk card. So if I then choose to trade it to this person who needs it to finish off this boss, then together as a group we can progress further. So that's how that works, but apparently the higher your charisma skill, or attribute, whatever you want to call it, the higher point perk cards you can share with your group members. So the more charisma, the more important or beefy perk cards you can trade with other players. So that's kind of cool, makes sense, especially if you want to trade perk cards. It's interesting though, I wonder if it goes the other way, because that's almost detrimental to you. If you can give away your really good perk cards, but you can't receive really good perk cards from the other person because their charisma isn't up to scratch. So I wonder if that affects just what you can give away or also what you can receive. Now the second part of this, it also affects your rewards from group missions. So when you do a group mission, apparently the more your charisma, I would assume, the better the rewards you get. This might go back to what it says at the start there. Charisma is your ability to lead and help others. The more charisma you have, when in a group, it will affect that group by giving your group better rewards from group missions. Now it might just give you better rewards when in a group mission and not necessarily the rest of your party. But of course, if you get something really good that you can't use, you can then trade it on. So in a sense, it would benefit your party if even just you got better rewards from group missions because you had a high charisma. But that's interesting, and I suppose on a definition level, I don't know why charisma would make you get better items when killing, say, a Deathclaw boss. That doesn't really make sense. I feel like they kind of went for, we don't really know where this fits, so let's just stick it in charisma, which we do see later on as well. But yeah, that doesn't really make sense. Hey, I'm super charismatic. Boom, I killed the Deathclaw. Oh, and because I'm heaps charismatic, I get better loot from it? What? Anyway, and the final piece of this is prices are better when you barter. Of course, there are no NPCs, the only people you are bartering with are actual other players. Now, I might actually talk about this way more in depth at the end because I feel like there's a lot of weird loopholes or a lot of explaining to be done. So when it comes to your charisma being high, therefore you getting better prices when you barter with other players, yeah, we'll talk about that at the end because it's going to get a bit ranty and there's a lot of kind of math loopholes that could really mess this up. So when he finally clicks on the actual charisma attribute, it brings up 3 perk cards for him to choose from. The first one is Inspirational. When you are on a team, you and your teammates gain 5% more XP. This makes perfect sense. This is fitting perfectly into the archetype of charisma traditionally as an attribute, and it makes that thing earlier make sense how it benefits you and your teammates. So that makes total sense. Lone Wanderer, when adventuring alone, take 10% less damage and gain 10% AP regen. So traditionally in Fallout 4, this was when you didn't have a companion, but now this is when you aren't with other players. Now, I did just do a video on companions in Fallout 76. It's a confusing topic and the systems are in place, and there are also robots in place that would have the same AI issues as companions. Therefore, conclusively, there's no reason to not have companions in Fallout 76. It's just a decision by Bethesda Game Studios that we don't actually know what they've decided on. But back to this, again, yeah, I suppose this makes sense. It was in the charisma perk tree in Fallout 4, so it makes sense to be here again. Lone Wanderer, we're getting a kind of feel for where the charisma attribute lies in Fallout 76. The kind of things that will revolve around having a high charisma or charisma perks. But then it kind of gets flipped here. Vampire. Blood packs now satisfy thirst. No longer irradiate and heal 50% more. Now, if there's one thing that I associate with very charismatic people, it's having your thirst satisfied when drinking blood packs. I mean, my friend Peter, he charms everyone and he quite often gets healed 50% more when drinking blood, so totally makes sense. I mean, what? What are you guys doing? Again, I think this is where they were like, I don't know where this fits, so yeah, let's chuck it in the charisma tree. I feel like this should be an endurance kind of thing, like the, was it Lead Belly perk in Fallout 4? Or it let you drink dirty water and take less radiation damage from it. It's very similar to that, but it's in the charisma tree? What? Why? What does charisma have to do with drinking blood? If it was something like other players hated you when you drank blood or something because it made you look like a cannibal, then yeah, but it's not. It's to do with the actual healing attributes or components of drinking blood. Very weird. I don't know why they've put this in the charisma tree. Am I crazy thinking this doesn't fit here? Charisma, blood packs now satisfy thirst, no longer irradiate and heal 50% more. Is that not the most uncharisma-y thing possible? I feel like what they might be doing is, if you go on a heavy charisma-based character, that they're putting options in there for you so you can survive a little bit better in the wasteland. Even though drinking blood has nothing to do with charisma, I think again that it's just there so if you are a full charisma character, you do have some options to help you survive, and that they're making the attribute perks a little bit vaguer and broader to make going really strong in one attribute tree not so detrimental. So that's kind of weird, but I suppose it kind of makes sense if we think about it from that perspective. But now what I want to do is kind of go through Fallout 4's charisma perks and we can kind of get a feeling for what we'll see in Fallout 76, I would imagine. Or try and figure out what charisma perks in Fallout 4 would totally make sense in Fallout 76 and which ones wouldn't. So first up we have the Cap Collector. This gives you better prices when buying and selling. Now of course that works when there's one player in the world and you're just dealing with NPCs, but as we know, Fallout 76 has no NPCs and all the people you'll be trading with are other real people. Again, I'm gonna save this monetary rant for the end because big loopholes that can be abused. The next we have the Lady Killer / the Black Widow perk. This basically just makes you do more damage in combat to the opposite sex, or whichever sex you chose, or however it's going to work. So if you choose the Lady Killer perk, you're going to do X amount of more damage to female players. There's also elements to this perk that are based around persuasion and dialogue and pacification through intimidation. Again, because we're not going to be interacting with NPCs, and it's actually just a conversation based between you, a real person, and a real person on the other end of the character in front of you on screen, these elements are going to be lost completely. So we could see these return, but only a portion of what they originally did. Then we have the Lone Wanderer perk. We already know that's coming back. We saw that earlier. It makes sense. If you're not in a group, yeah, you're going to get the Lone Wanderer perk. Next, we have Attack Dog. This is completely based around having a dog companion. Again, we don't know if we're going to have companions. Check out that video if you want to hear more about that. But at this point, who knows? Whether or not this perk will be in the game is totally determined about whether or not there are companions, and then if there are dog companions, which I would imagine there would be because there's no human NPCs. Now the Animal Friend perk, this is interesting because if you point a gun at an animal, you have a chance to pacify it, and the higher you go, you can make that animal attack and you can make the animal do specific commands. Now given there's no human NPCs in Fallout 76, I think we're going to be running into or interacting with animals and creatures a lot more, so something like the Animal Friend perk could be very useful. The next perk is Local Leader. This was based around settlements. Lets you establish supply lines between your workshop settlements, and you could also build stores and workstations at your workshop settlements. This might be able to come into effect a little bit because there is a shot where we see someone building different vendor stations in their settlements or camps or whatever you call them in Fallout 76. But interestingly, the perk requirement is based around the products you will be selling from that vendor station. For example, the one we see is a medical store and it requires the first aid perk, not a charisma based perk. That's probably a video in itself, but something like the Local Leader perk in charisma might have some use, or it might be in Fallout 76. Next we have Party Boy / Party Girl. Now these could actually come very much in use. As we know, there's a soft core survival component to Fallout 76. You need food, you need water, you need to eat and drink to survive. Now alcohol doesn't go off. I'm sure over like 1,000 years a bottle of whiskey is gonna go off or something, but basically alcohol is a consumable that won't deteriorate like other food and drink items will in Fallout 76. And the Party Boy / Party Girl perks, firstly, it removes the chance of getting addicted to alcohol. Secondly, the effects of alcohol are doubled. This could be bad or good, as usually alcohol in Fallout games has a benefit and a negative. And the last rank makes your luck increased by 3 while you are under the influence of alcohol. I don't know how luck's gonna work in Fallout 76, but I can definitely see elements of the Party Boy / Party Girl perk being useful in this wasteland with the soft core survival component. Next we have the Inspirational perk. Across the 3 ranks, this basically means companions can't hurt you, your companions resist more damage in combat and cannot be harmed by your attacks, and your companions can carry more items. Now this might play into what we saw earlier where it says charisma is your ability to help and lead other players. What charisma might do is basically make you a buff character where you have these perks like Inspirational, which makes everyone else in the party resist more damage, do more damage, not be able to take damage from each other, and also carry more. So I can definitely see the charisma attribute in Fallout 76 being something along the lines of, classically in D&D, a bard is a good example. They're not good in combat, but they kind of buff up the rest of the party. And I think charisma might go down that route, or route if you're American. Next we have the Wasteland Whisperer. This is the same thing as the Animal Friend. You can basically pacify creatures within the wasteland and make them fight for you or give them specific commands. Again, given there's no human NPCs in Fallout 76, this could be very useful because I think we're going to be running into animals and creatures a lot more than we did in Fallout 4. And also going back to the topic of companions, this might be the closest thing we get. And finally, Intimidation. This is the same thing as the Wasteland Whisperer and the Animal Friend, but lets you do all that stuff with humanoid NPCs, which are not in Fallout 76, so Intimidation will not be in it. So as you can see, I think in terms of what it was classically, Charisma is the attribute that's going to get hit the most in Fallout 76. That's why I wanted to talk about it, because I was like, it's in the game, but what is it gonna do? There's like only 50% of the things it traditionally does will have any place in Fallout 76. So I would say that it's gonna be interesting to see where they take it, and it will be, but we already know that they're taking it in a weird way by adding perks like Vampire into the Charisma perk cards? What? Again, Charisma does not affect your ability to drink blood. I don't know what? Who did this? Anyway, as promised, let's get to the financial thing that we saw earlier. Charisma blah 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 blah. It gives you better prices when you barter. Okay, so you're only going to be bartering with other players, or a proxy for another player. So how can you get better prices via a mechanic within the game when the price is being determined by two real people? For example, if you are selling a sniper rifle for 100 caps and I want to buy that sniper rifle off you, but I've got some charisma perks that give me better prices when bartering, how does that work? Because you, another human, have decided what the price is. So how does this work without ripping the other player off? If you say, yes, this is 100 caps, and I go, I will buy that off you, do you get 100 caps? But then if so, how have I gotten better prices when bartering? It's the exact same. Maybe you get 90 caps, but then you've been ripped off because you wanted to sell it for 100, but then because of my perk, you get less money? That's not fair. What if you get 100 caps, but I only lose 90 caps? Now here is where there is a massive loophole that could be abused very, very badly. Because what's happened is 10 caps have been generated from nowhere. Now again, this might not be how it works, but I cannot think how one player can get better prices via a mechanic in the game, such as a charisma perk, when again, the price is being determined by two real people, not a mechanic within the game. So if I've got this perk and you say I'm selling this sniper rifle for 100 gold, I buy it off you, you get 100 gold, but I only lose 90 caps. This is the only way I can see people actually getting better prices without anyone losing. Because if I end up paying 100 gold, then I've benefited from this charisma perk 0%. But if you sell it for 100 gold and I give you 90 gold because of my perk, I save money, sure, but you lose money because of a perk I have. That isn't fair to you. So the person selling needs to get whatever they expected, but the person buying also needs to get a better price. And it goes both ways. If you're selling, are you going to get more gold than what you asked for because you have a charisma perk? Then what? Does the other player have to give you more gold than you agreed on because you have a charisma perk? Again, this is the only way I can see this happening, and that's very, very abusable because money is being generated from nowhere. So if I buy that sniper rifle off you, you get 100 caps, but I only lose 90 caps, 10 caps has been generated from nowhere just then. So we could make that transaction back and forth 100 times, and suddenly 1,000 caps has been generated via a perk because one of us is giving 90 caps but the other is gaining 100 caps. Again, don't know if this is how it's going to work, but it's the only way I can see this working with an in-game perk affecting a price determined by two real people. Now this issue still exists if you make one of these vending machine things at your settlement, because while you're not interacting with the player directly, the other player who has set this thing up determines the price of things, and all the gold or caps that goes into this vending machine ultimately goes back to a player, the player that put it there. So again, if you're getting better prices on this vending machine because of a charisma perk you have, some other player who's set this up is losing money because of a perk you have. Again, not fair, but again, the only way I can see this actually working. So this video turned out to be a lot more complicated and a lot more layers than I expected, but hey, that's how it is. That's my theory. A video is as long as it needs to be or as short as it needs to be. Thought this would be about 4 minutes, and it's I'm currently like 50 minutes into recording, so we'll see what happens here. But charisma in Fallout 76. It's going to be the attribute that takes the biggest hit to how it was traditionally in previous Fallout games, and from what I've seen, I'm left rather confused. I don't know why the vampire perk's in there. Again, drinking blood has nothing to do with your charisma. How are you going to get better prices when the prices are not determined by an in-game mechanic? Surely someone's got to lose out, or it's going to put in place a very abusable system. So I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know if Bethesda Game Studios know how that's going to work, but I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on this because it's so complicated and so messy. So of course, anything I touched on in this video, any thoughts you have that could add to any of the musings I have or confusions, or conclusions, of course, please feel free to comment. I'm very interested to hear what you think about all of this or any particular part of this. I've been Camel, and until the next video, hope you have a great weekend. I'll see you soon in the next one. Take it easy.
Monitor your environment for anything out of the ordinary. The home of tomorrow may undergo certain challenges. After a crisis, work with your neighbors.